Hi, we're here for homework 4, chapter 12. Let's get to it. The directions say we are writing equations of circles. So we've been working on this a while. It says use the information provided to write and I think this says the standard equation of a circle. So the standard equation of a circle would look something like this. X minus the number, which is our x coordinate of the center, plus y minus the y coordinate of the number at the center equals our radius squared. And so we want to write it in this format, and it's definitely not in that format. None of these questions are written like this, and so it's our job to write it like that. Now you might be wondering, why? Why would I do this? Why would I want to write it like that? Well, mostly we've been answering that question, that this form allows us to know where the center is and where the radius is. And if we know where the center is, and for instance, let's say this was 5 and that was 2, and the radius here was 16 squared. Okay, so if it did look like that, then I know that the center is at positive 5, positive 2, and that my radius is 16. Now that doesn't mean that that number there is 16. In fact, the number there could be 16 squared or 256. But again, when it's written like this, I know this, and if I know this, I can draw it. Otherwise known as I can be Desmos. Okay, now Desmos is pretty amazing. If you type this into Desmos, it can draw it. But if you give me this, I cannot draw it. So somehow Desmos is doing some math and turning it into this form and then figuring out what this is, and then it's drawing it, but it's not showing you that. So if you don't like writing out all these steps, that's fine. You can use Desmos, but then you're going to have to graph every one for me. You'll have to tell me what Desmos says was the center, what Desmos said for the radius, and you can totally do it that way. I'm going to do it the way using algebra, okay? So again, you can do it two ways. You can use Desmos to get our center and our radius, and then get to your equation. Okay, the other way is you can use algebra to turn it into this equation, and part of the skill of algebra is to complete this square. And I end up having two squares because this is a square and that is a square. Okay, so you can do it this way, or you can do it both ways. You can use algebra to complete this square and then use Desmos to check. So let's do it. Okay, so it looks like a lot of the stuff is here on the right, and we notice here I need everything to the left. So, okay, so I'm going to subtract 64, and I'm going to add y squared. And so I'm going to redraw this equation with everything here on the left. I have an x squared plus an 8x plus an x squared minus a 2y plus a y squared minus a 64 is equal to 0. Okay, so everything is over there. Now, maybe I messed up a little bit, because maybe it was totally okay for there to be a regular number, a whole number of sorts, over here. So that really wasn't necessary. Some kids like to move it over because here in a minute, though, they'll later figure out that I could have just not moved it because I'm going to move it back. But I don't know. You'll figure that out. Okay. So notice I look at the number in front of the x. Not the x squared, but the number in front of the x is 8. So I can write x plus 8 squared. Then I look at the number in front of the y. Oh, wait, I have to divide that in half, don't I? Ooh, okay. So that would make, half of that would make that, and that should make sense that that would be a 4x and a 4x, and that's how we get 8x. Okay? Here, the number in front of the y, divide that in half, so that'd be y minus 1 squared. And again, it should make sense. That's negative 1y, negative 1y. If you add those together, you get negative 2y. Okay, pretty good. So I'm pretty close to writing it in this form. Not quite done yet. I need to know what the radius is squared. So let's do that part. We notice that in order to complete the square, literally, I'd have to take the 4 and the 4 and get a 16. So I'd take this number here and take 4 times 4 and make sure I add 16 to both sides. Now, see this square up here? Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. And again, the same thing was happening here. I took a negative 1 times a negative 1, and that'd be a positive 1. So I'm going to add positive 1 to both sides. So when I completed the square, added to both sides. Completed the square, added to both sides. And notice the 64 needs to move back over here. So he was here to begin with, but that's okay. So when I add all that up, 0 and 16 and 1 and 64, I get ooh, 81. So they said write it in standard form, which that would be totally okay. The reason why I got excited was that means my radius is 9. Pretty cool. Okay, so I wrote it in standard form. Next question. It's definitely not in standard form because I can't see what the center would be and I can't see what the radius is. So I need to make it look like I want. But I like it. Everything's over to 0. So I look at the number in front of the x and I divide that by 2. So it looks like it would be x plus 7 squared. Now I look at the number in front of the y, I get negative 12, so that'd be y minus 6 squared. Okay? Now once again, if I had a square off to the side here, I'd have 7x and 7x. And that's how I'd end up getting 14x's. 7x and 7x makes 14x. But I'd need to complete the square. 7 times 7 is 49. So 7 times 7, that number times itself is 49, and I need to add 49 to both sides. Here, to complete the square, same type of idea here. I need to take negative 6 times negative 6, and that'd be positive 36. Add to both sides. Last but not least, I have a positive 4 that's not helping anybody over there, so I'm going to subtract 4. And so my equation is, what happens when I add all that up? So 49 and 36 minus 4, 81. Ooh, I like that number, because again, that means my radius must have been 9. Okay, next one. Pretty close to everything. It looks like I got to move the 55. Now again, you can leave it there if you want. If you're not ready to leave it there, that's fine too. Got to get the 10, negative 10y on that side. And so I've taken everything away on the left. There's nothing left over here but the number 0. And to everything else, it doesn't matter what order I write it in, because any order is fine when you're adding up a bunch of numbers. Okay. Now, same technique. I take the number in front of the x, I get 2, and I cut that in, divide it by 2. So that'd be x plus 1 squared. Now here, the number in front of the y is negative 10, so I'm going to do y minus 5 squared. And now following the pattern, I did whatever was here, 4 times 4, 16, add to both sides. Negative 1 times negative 1, that's positive 1, add to both sides. 7 times 7, that's 49, I added to both sides. So continuing this pattern, 1 times 1 is 1, so I need to add 1 to both sides of this equation. I got a negative 55 here and a 0, and I need to add 1 to both sides of this equation. Okay, now here I have a negative 5 times a negative 5, so that means I need to add 25 to both sides of the equation. And not to forget, this 55 I'm going to move back over here. Okay, so I have x plus 1, y minus 5. Ooh, 81. This is getting creepy. Okay, getting 81 a lot. That's fine, though. That's the radius of dime. So that's in standard form. Now here's an easy one. The center is 11. And the center is -8. And my formula says radius squared. So most students would probably rewrite this. It's okay with me if you leave it like that, but it's also okay to rewrite it like this. Both are correct. Okay. Let's look at this guy. Ooh, translate. Very cool. So my old center is at +16, +6. So if I translated, right, 4 to the left and 2 up, my new center is at 12.8. Now, nobody said anything about dilating it, making it bigger or smaller. So the only thing different is the left side of the equation. X minus 12 squared, y minus 8 squared equals 1. Join me on the next video.